For almost 50 years, the Federal Bureau of Investigation could not touch Meyer Lansky. They investigated him from the 1930s until the 1980s. Agents built careers on him. He was called the mob's accountant, the chairman of the board, the financial brain of American organized crime, the man who took the money that came out of Prohibition and turned it into casinos, and turned the casinos into a business that ran across state lines and international borders while everyone around him went to prison. In half a century of that, the only time Meyer Lansky ever went to jail was a 2-month sentence for illegal gambling in 1953. One of the agents who spent years on him admitted afterwards, with something close to admiration, that if the man had gone into legitimate business, he'd have ended up running a Fortune 500 company. Lansky himself once told an associate that what they had built was bigger than U.S. Steel. And by the end of his life, the Bureau had settled on a number. They believed Meyer Lansky had somewhere north of $300 million hidden in bank accounts around the world, Switzerland, the Caribbean, wherever a man that careful would put it. Some estimates ran to $400 million. In today's money, that is measured in billions. They never found a cent of it. He died of lung cancer in Miami Beach on the 15th of January, 1983. He was 80 years old. And when his family sat down and opened the books, they discovered that the estate of the richest criminal financier in American history was worth about $57,000. Not $57 million. $57,000. 6 months later, an old associate came to the apartment to collect the last of a debt he was owed. He went through what was there: some jewelry, a few valuables, some stocks and bonds. There was nothing else. So which is it? Did Meyer Lansky pull off the greatest financial disappearing act in the history of organized crime, hiding a fortune so completely that 4 decades of federal investigation and his own family could never find it? Or was there never $300 million in the first place? There is one piece of evidence that points hard in one direction, and it involves his eldest son. This is what happened to Meyer Lansky's money. He was not born Meyer Lansky, and he was not Italian, and he could never have been a member of the organization he helped design. He was born Meyer Suchaljansky on the 4th of July, 1902, in Grodno, then part of the Russian Empire, now in Belarus. His family were Polish Jews. In 1911, he came to the United States with his mother and his brother to join his father, who had gone ahead, and they settled on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. He was 9 years old, and he was very small. People called him the Little Man his entire life. On those streets, he met 2 other boys. One was a violent, charismatic kid named Benjamin Siegel, who would be known as Bugsy, and who would remain his closest friend until the day he was shot through a window in Beverly Hills. The other was a Sicilian boy named Salvatore Lucania, who would become Lucky Luciano. Those 3, between them, built the modern American underworld, and they divided the work in a way that tells you everything about how it functioned. Siegel was the nerve, Luciano was the architect, the man who ended the wars and designed the commission and the 5 families. Lansky was the one who counted. Because there was a problem nobody had solved. Prohibition produced staggering amounts of cash, more money than any of these men had ever imagined, arriving in paper bags, untraceable and unbankable, and useless in large quantities. You cannot buy a building with a suitcase. You cannot pay taxes on income. You cannot explain. And money that sits still is money that gets found. Lansky's contribution was to work out how to make it move. He put Prohibition profits into gambling operations, first illegal carpet joints, in Florida, Louisiana, Arkansas, Kentucky. Then legal casinos, where the law allowed. He layered ownership through partners and front men and holding companies. He moved money through banks in countries that did not ask questions. He is generally credited with either inventing or perfecting the techniques that organized crime would use to launder money for the next 50 years. And critically, he structured it so that his own name appeared on almost nothing. A journalist who spent years investigating him put it in one line that is still the best description of the man anyone has managed. "Lansky doesn't own property," he said. "He owns people." That is why he was uncatchable. There was nothing in his name to seize. There was no building with his signature on the deed, no company with him listed as director. He held positions in the underworld the way a consultant holds relationships, everywhere and nowhere on paper. For 50 years, it worked perfectly. And then it stopped working in a single night, 90 miles from Florida. Havana was the masterpiece. Through the 1950s, in partnership with the Cuban dictator Fulgencio Batista, Lansky and his associates turned Havana into something that did not exist anywhere else on Earth. A city of legal casinos, luxury hotels, and nightclubs, an hour's flight from Miami, in a country where the government was a business partner rather than an obstacle. It was the model for what Las Vegas would later become, and it was built first, and Lansky was at the center of it. Before he left Cuba, he was said to be worth around $20 million, an enormous fortune in 1950s money. On the 1st of January, 1959, Fidel Castro's forces entered Havana. Batista fled the country, and the casinos were finished. Nationalized, seized, taken by the revolutionary government. Not sold, not negotiated, taken. Everything Meyer Lansky had built in Cuba, the hotels, the casinos, the arrangement with the government, the entire operation, was gone inside a matter of weeks, and there was not a single thing he could do about it, because you cannot sue a revolution. He was 66 years old when the decade ended, and he had just lost what was almost certainly the largest single concentration of his wealth. Hold on to that, because it matters enormously for the question at the end. What happened over the following decade is one of the strangest chapters in his life, and almost nobody tells it. In 1970, facing federal tax charges in the United States, Meyer Lansky left the country and went to Israel. He was Jewish. Israel's law of return grants citizenship to Jews from anywhere in the world. It is, on its face, an unconditional promise. He applied. Israel refused him. The government determined that his presence would endanger public welfare, and he fought it through the Israeli courts, all the way up, and he lost. In 1972, he was ordered out of the country, and then something genuinely extraordinary happened. He got on an aircraft and went looking for a country, any country, that would take him. He tried across South America. He was turned away. He flew from place to place, an old man with a passport nobody wanted to stamp, and eventually, there was nowhere left to go. He flew back to Miami, and federal agents were waiting for him at the airport. Within an hour of being taken into custody, he posted $250,000 in cash as bail. That is worth well over $1.5 million in today's money, produced immediately, on a weekday, by a man who had supposedly been driven abroad by financial and legal pressure. That single fact is the strongest argument the FBI ever had. He went to trial. In 1974, he was acquitted of all charges, and then, at 72 years old, having been rejected by the country he thought would take him, having lost Cuba, having outlived most of the men he built it all with, Meyer Lansky went home to Miami Beach and lived quietly for the last decade of his life. He walked his dog. He ate in the same restaurants. He was recognized constantly and bothered by almost nobody. He had 3 children, and what happened to them is the part of this story that answers the question. His eldest son, Bernard, everyone called him Buddy, was born in 1930 with cerebral palsy. His mother took it as a punishment. He had his father's quick mind and a body that would not cooperate with it, and he was disabled for his entire life, needing care and treatment that cost money continuously for decades. His second son, Paul, went to the United States Military Academy at West Point. And the way he got there is one of the most remarkable facts in this entire story. His appointment came from Senator Estes Kefauver, the man who chaired the Senate Committee on Organized Crime, the televised hearings that made Meyer Lansky a household name in America. The senator investigating the father sponsored the son's admission to the nation's premier military academy, and afterwards wrote that the Lansky boy had justified the confidence placed in him. Paul graduated in 1954. He served in the Air Force, flew in Vietnam, and resigned his commission as a captain in 1963 to take a civilian engineering job in Washington State. He also put as much distance as he could between himself and his surname. He told people that he and his father had fallen out and no longer spoke. One account of the family records the break is real, dating from the day he graduated. His daughter Sandra grew up in a world of men she called uncle, who spoiled her completely. The sort of childhood where her father bought out the row in front at a Broadway show so nothing would block her view. It did not stay that way. Her mother's mental health deteriorated. She married at 16. And in the autumn of 1958, an FBI agent turned up at her apartment claiming a connection to West Point, where he said he'd been a cadet when she visited her brother. He was there to get close to her and to find out what she knew about her father. That is what the family got. One son who couldn't walk, one son who flew for the United States Air Force and denied knowing him, and a daughter the Bureau ran an approach on before she was old enough to buy a drink. He died on the 15th of January, 1983. And here is where the two theories collide, and where you have to decide what you think. The Bureau's position was straightforward and had 50 years of evidence behind it. Meyer Lansky was the best money launderer who ever lived. His entire career was built on making assets invisible. His estate showing $57,000 was not a surprise to them. It was the final proof of how good he was. The money was in Switzerland, in the Caribbean, held by nominees, structured through people rather than paper. He owned people, not property. And you cannot subpoena a relationship. There is real evidence for this. The $250,000 in cash, on the spot, in 1970. And his own daughter said in 2010 that her father had given his brother $15 million in the 1970s. $15 million is not the behavior of a man who is broke. But the other case is stronger than it looks, and it comes from the man who spent years going through the records. His biographer, Robert Lacey, concluded that Lansky's finances were genuinely strained through the last 2 decades of his life, that the loss of Cuba was not a setback, but a catastrophe he never recovered from, that the reputation had outgrown the reality by an enormous margin, and that a great deal of what everyone believed about Meyer Lansky's fortune came from law enforcement estimates produced by an agency with an institutional interest in him being a criminal mastermind, rather than a semi-retired gambler who had lost his empire to a revolution. Modern scholarship has moved toward that view. The reference works now note that his role was frequently exaggerated in popular accounts, that no substantial hidden fortune was ever recovered, and that his estate at death was modest. And then there is the piece of evidence that, for me, weighs more than all of it. Meyer Lansky's will left the majority of the income from a trust, 65% of it, to the care of his disabled son. Buddy needed treatment for cerebral palsy for the rest of his life, and his father made provision for it. 6 years after Lansky died, the family still had no idea where any fortune was. Buddy spoke to the Associated Press about it. He said his father had told him he would be taken care of. He died in poverty. Buddy Lansky, the eldest son of the man the FBI believed had $300 million hidden in banks across the world, could not afford his own medical care, and neither, according to his biographer, could his father in the years before he died. You can construct an argument for the hidden fortune. Plenty of serious people have, but you have to get past this. A man who is sitting on $300 million, who has spent 50 years perfecting the art of moving money invisibly, and who leaves 2/3 of a trust to his disabled child, does not let that child die broke. Either the money did not exist, or it existed and he could not reach it, or it existed and somebody else took it after he died. Nobody has ever proved which. He is buried at Mount Nebo Cemetery in Miami. Buddy died in 1989, 6 years after his father. And he is buried in the same place, father and son, in the same ground under the flight path of the airliners coming in from Israel, the country that would not have him. So what happened to Meyer Lansky's money? The honest answer is that nobody knows, and anybody who tells you they do is selling something. What we know is this: he built a financial system that made the American underworld rich for 50 years. He was never convicted of anything worse than running a gambling operation, and served 2 months for it. He lost his largest holding to a revolution he could not fight. He was refused entry by the one country in the world that promises to take any Jew who asks. And he died in a modest apartment in Miami Beach with $57,000 to his name and a disabled son he had promised to provide for, who outlived him by 6 years and died with nothing. The FBI spent half a century looking for $300 million. The strongest evidence about whether it ever existed is not in a Swiss bank record. It is in what happened to his son,